Hey guys, and welcome back to Z3 Cubing. Today I'm going to show you my top 5 favorite cubes of 2018. Now before I get too far into talking about these puzzles, I just want to say that I haven't made a video like this in quite a long time, but you guys still seem to have quite an interest in them, and a lot of the ones that I've made previously are pretty old, so I figured I might as well go through and update some of the old ones, like talking about the cubes that I specifically got in the past year. So most of these cubes on this list are going to be cubes that I have gotten in the past year of 2018. At least one of these cubes though is definitely going to be making a return appearance from a previous top 5 video, but anyway, that's enough introduction. Let's get into the first cube. So this right here is the MF8 Sun cube. Now this is a very interesting and unique puzzle that honestly I have never solved before. Now when you first take a look at this cube from the outside, you'll notice that it looks kind of like a 3x3 with layers that aren't quite proportional, but it also has all these crazy 45-degree lines going every which way. So you might try at first to just turn it like a 3x3, and in fact it does turn exactly like that. You can do every move on a 3x3 on this cube. Now you may think, what are these lines going everywhere? So you try and do a turn like this doesn't do anything. Maybe the corner turns? No? And in fact, the only turn that you can do from the solved cube is turns like a 3x3 like this. The actual interesting part of this cube's movement is actually a little bit hard to find. What you have to do is turn a single layer 45 degrees like this, and then what you can do is you can turn these other layers like this, 90 degrees, you can even turn it 45 degrees, and keep on going. So pretty much every single layer you can turn any increment of 45 degrees, but it also has this bandaging, so sometimes like you wouldn't be able to turn this layer, but you would be able to turn another layer like say this one over here. And it really just gets into this jumbled, crazy looking mess really quickly. It kind of looks like you just took a normal Rubik's Cube and just kind of morphed it around and moved the pieces in a way that they're not supposed to be moved. And that's the really cool thing about this puzzle. You can just make really cool looking shapes and do weird moves that of course would not be possible on a 3x3, but they look really cool doing it on a cube like this, even though it has all the crazy extra lines around it. So overall it's just a cube that looks really cool when it's scrambled, and I haven't really shown you guys anything compared to how messed up this cube can get. Like for example, if you just do a couple turns like this, it looks like a normal 3x3, it's all cubic and everything. It looks like you could just solve it, but if you look at this edge piece right here, it has a bit of yellow and a little bit of white. And this center piece too, it has a little bit of white there, so you definitely would not be able to solve this case like you would a normal 3x3. It's a lot more complicated than that. So even if you can get it back into a cube shape, there's all these crazy commutators and stuff that you have to do to move all these little tiny pieces into the right spot. So yeah, that's what makes it so incredibly hard, but it still is one of my favorite puzzles, at least to look at and scramble partially. Now that first one was an example of a cube that I like as a puzzle, but I don't necessarily like to solve it. This next one up is one that I actually do like to solve on occasion. This one is the Chie Clover cube. Now basically what this one is it's a cube that turns on every single edge, so there's 12 different faces that it can turn around, just like this. Basically, if you're looking at how different types of puzzles turn, you can have a normal cube like a 3x3, which is face turning, so each face has an axis that turns around it. You can have cubes that are corner turning, like this cube here, so each corner has an axis that turns around it. And then you can also have edge turning cubes like this one, the Clover cube. So the puzzle that this one is actually the most similar to is called the Curvy Copter, which you can see is also edge turning. And this one kind of just looks like a more complicated version of this one. And if you actually look at each of the pieces, the only real difference are these corners. So this one has corners, whereas this one does not. And if you actually turn a side halfway like this, you can see that it does have corners, they just don't have stickers on them, and they're hidden underneath the mechanism. So basically this one's just a simpler version of the Curvy Copter, which is why I like it. Honestly, I am able to solve a Curvy Copter all the way up until the last few corners. I'm just not really sure how to do it. I could memorize the algorithm if I really wanted to, but I don't really want to. So this cube I come along to and I can solve the whole thing, whereas the Curvy Copter I just kind of get stuck on the last few pieces. So yeah, this cube I like because it's a little bit of a challenge. It's quite different the way that the pieces move around while you're turning it compared to most face turning cubes like the 3x3, but at the same time it is a relatively easy puzzle to solve, which is definitely why I like it. Anyway, next up is a very similar cube to this one. I actually unboxed it at the very same time that I unboxed that cube. It's made by the same company. This is the Chie Pentacle cube. Now, if you first look at this cube, you may be confused about how it's supposed to turn, and as soon as you pick it up and try and do some turns on it, you may still continue to be confused about how exactly it's supposed to turn. So the actual trick is, what you have to do is you turn these sides, which you'll notice are totally free at every single angle. You make it so that one of these lines lines up all the way around 4 sides of the cube, and now you can turn it just like you would a 3x3. You can do the same thing on the opposite side, if you line it up to the opposite side, like that, and now you see we have this weird pattern where you're on a 3x3. If you were to do that, it would just look straight like this. And you can also, of course, kind of turn around on a different axis and start lining them up along here, like this. as you can see, you can do another turn, and you can also do turns just in the middle like this, and then do another turn, and the middle like this, do another turn, and it gets pretty mixed up pretty quickly. So the biggest positive of this cube, in my opinion, and the main reason why it's on this list for me, is just the really fun aspect of the turning. You see just kind of switching back and forth between the normal layer turns and the circular middle turns really quickly back and forth like this. This motion is just really fun for me, and doing that while you're in a solve is just really satisfying, being able to just do that over and over again. And speaking of solving it, I did figure out how to solve it on my own pretty easily not too long after getting the puzzle. It's really not too difficult if you know how to solve something like a 5x5. It's pretty much just like doing the centers of that over and over again, but in a little bit more of a convoluted way as you're doing these turns together and lining everything up every single time you want to switch axes like this. But yeah, just the interesting, unique aspect to the turning of this puzzle, along with the solving challenge, is why I really like this puzzle and why it's number 3 on this list. Anyway, next up here is a Shengxiao puzzle, and this one was actually on my previous favorite puzzles list. This is the Shengxiao Gigaminx, and I think you guys can tell just by glancing at it why I like this puzzle so much and why it's remained on this list for so long. Just look at how big it is, like look at my hands compared to it. I can barely hold the whole thing at once. Basically what this puzzle is it's a Megaminx, which is a dodecahedral puzzle. It has 12 sides, and so that means that each side is a pentagon instead of course, a square on a normal cube. So that means it has way more pieces just on one face and way more pieces around the entire cube. Now this one, the Megaminx, is actually very similar to this one, a 3x3, based on the amount of layers that it has. And so if this one were like a normal 3x3, this one would be like a normal 5x5, because it has 2 extra layers. You can see kind of one on each side. It kind of just has more cuts everywhere, which means it has way more pieces, and it is way bigger. Now this one, I don't really like solving. It takes me like 20 minutes to solve it, so it's kind of just tedious. It's doing the same thing over and over again, especially edge pairing. There's just so many pieces to put together that you're just repeating yourself over and over again. Now I did actually figure out how to solve this puzzle on my own. It's not actually too hard if you know how to solve something like a 5x5. It's pretty much the same concepts as a 5x5, just doing it a lot more on a lot more different pieces. And so yeah, you can definitely like a puzzle for reasons other than the traditional puzzle aspect of the cube, actually solving it. In other words, I don't really like this puzzle because I like solving it. I like it just because there's so many little tiny pieces and it's just so massive and fun to turn. Anyway, next up onto the last cube is kind of similar to that concept of having a lot of pieces and just being really big. This one is the 9x9. This one is called the Mofeng Jiaoshi MF9 9x9. It's a very recently released 9x9. In fact, I unboxed it just a couple of videos ago on my channel. But the really cool thing about it is that it's really cheap. Only $35 compared to like the $80 that you'd probably be expected to pay for a 9-layered cube before this one came out. So it's definitely by far the cheapest cube of this size that you can buy. And it actually is physically pretty small, as you can see, compared to a 3x3. It's not too much bigger, so that actually makes it pretty handleable while you're doing turns on it like this. Not too much harder than like a 7x7 or something like that. It also did come with another 8x8 cube. This one was $30, but this one doesn't turn quite as well, and this one is bigger, of course, so this is why it's in my favorite list and not the 8x8. And the solving process of it, even though it's repetitive, is actually moderately fun. If you know how to solve a 7x7, you basically know how to solve this cube. It's exactly the same thing, just with more pieces. But if you're good at 7x7, which I've been practicing cubes like that quite a bit, it actually goes pretty quickly, and I think it's kind of interesting to expand your knowledge of those cubes onto more layers. It's just kind of weird how there's so many different types of pieces that you can have when you're making the bars and everything. I don't know. I guess I should get something like a 17x17 and see how many different types of pieces there are for me to mess around on that one. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. Those are the 5 cubes that I wanted to talk about today. These are basically my top 5 favorite cubes that I've gotten in the past year of 2018. Except for the Gigaminx, of course, but I think that's still safe to leave on this list because it's remained one of my favorite cubes, even over the couple of years that I've had it. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video, and I will see you guys next time.